Welcome to one of history's most audacious conspiracy theories. In 1991, German historian Heribert Illig proposed something truly extraordinary, that nearly 300 years of medieval history simply never happened. According to this phantom time hypothesis, the years 614 to 911 CE were completely fabricated through an elaborate conspiracy involving emperors and popes. Today, we'll dive deep into this fascinating theory, examine the evidence presented, understand why mainstream historians reject it, and explore why such historical revisionism continues to captivate people's imagination despite overwhelming contrary evidence. Heribert Illig's hypothesis, first proposed in 1991, makes an extraordinary claim. Approximately 297 years of medieval history were entirely fabricated. According to Illig, the years 614 to 911 CE never actually occurred but were artificially inserted into historical records. This would mean we're not living in the 21st century at all, but rather in the early 1700s. The alleged masterminds behind this massive historical fraud? Holy Roman Emperor Otto III, Pope Sylvester II, and Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII, who supposedly collaborated to create this phantom period. It's a theory that challenges the very foundation of how we understand historical chronology and knowledge construction. While thoroughly rejected by mainstream historians, the sheer audacity of the claim has made it an enduring topic in alternative history circles and a fascinating case study in historical revisionism. Illig's radical theory emerged from what he perceived as inconsistencies in the historical record of the early Middle Ages. This period, often called the Dark Ages, is characterized by fewer written documents compared to both the preceding Roman era and the later High Middle Ages. Illig seized upon this comparative documentary scarcity as the foundation for his hypothesis. He questioned how entire dynasties, particularly the Carolingian dynasty of Charlemagne, could have risen and fallen while leaving what he considered insufficient archaeological evidence. The theory gained initial traction among some German intellectuals in the 1990s, particularly those interested in alternative historical narratives. Illig further developed his ideas in his 1996 book Das erfundene Mittelalter, The Invented Middle Ages, which elaborated on the supposed motives behind this grand deception. The relative obscurity of the early medieval period compared to other historical eras provided fertile ground for Illig's speculative reconstruction of history, though what he saw as suspicious gaps, professional historians recognized as typical features of a transitional period in European history. According to Illig, this massive historical fabrication was driven by specific political and religious motivations. Otto III, he claimed, was obsessed with ruling during the year 1000 CE, a date of tremendous apocalyptic significance in medieval Christianity. By artificially extending the calendar through fabricated centuries, Otto could position himself as emperor during this momentous millennial year, enhancing his prestige and perceived divine mandate. Pope Sylvester II allegedly collaborated in this scheme to strengthen papal authority during a critical period for the Church. Meanwhile, Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII supposedly participated to improve diplomatic relations with the Holy Roman Empire. This conspiracy theory presents a seemingly coherent narrative explaining various historical curiosities through deliberate manipulation rather than natural historical development. Illig suggested that these powerful figures had both the motivation and the means to execute such a massive deception, rewriting history to serve their immediate political and religious goals. The theory portrays these medieval rulers as not just participants in history but as its literal creators, fabricating centuries of events, people, and cultural developments to serve their immediate needs. Illig's argument rests on several pillars of alleged evidence supporting his timeline revision. First, he pointed to what he characterized as a suspicious scarcity of archaeological findings from the supposed phantom period. While acknowledging that some artifacts exist, he suggested conventional historians had misstated them to fill a fabricated timeline. Second, he highlighted architectural inconsistencies, particularly focusing on Romanesque architecture, which he argued appeared to emerge without sufficient stylistic predecessors or evolutionary development. Perhaps most controversially, Illig pointed to the Gregorian calendar reform implemented by Pope Gregory XIII in 1582. This reform corrected a 13-day discrepancy that had accumulated between the Julian calendar and the actual solar year. Illig contended that this correction was excessive if the Julian calendar had been used for the conventionally accepted period since its introduction by Julius Caesar in 45 BCE. By his calculations, the discrepancy should have been significantly less, suggesting to him that additional time had been artificially inserted into the historical record. These seemingly technical observations formed the foundation of his radical reinterpretation of medieval chronology, though each has been systematically addressed by mainstream historians and scientists. At the heart of Illig's hypothesis lies his most provocative claim, that Charlemagne, one of history's most consequential figures, never actually existed. Despite being credited with uniting much of Western Europe, establishing the foundations of the Holy Roman Empire, and fostering the Carolingian Renaissance, Illig declared Charlemagne entirely fictional. He characterized this supposedly mythical emperor as suspiciously similar to other great historical rulers, suggesting he was a composite character invented to provide historical legitimacy to Otto III's imperial ambitions. According to this theory, the extensive documentation of Charlemagne's reign, including contemporary biographies like Einhard's Vita Caroli Magni, was an elaborate forgery created to support the phantom timeline. This aspect of the theory requires believing that not just dates but entire historical figures and their documented achievements were fabricated wholesale. The claim challenges not just chronology but the very existence of a figure who profoundly shaped European political structures, educational systems, and cultural development. In Illig's view, the towering historical legacy attributed to Charlemagne was constructed entirely as a political tool rather than reflecting the genuine impact of a historical ruler. The academic response to the phantom time hypothesis has been unequivocal rejection, supported by multiple independent lines of evidence. Astronomers have provided some of the most compelling counterarguments, pointing to records of celestial events such as comets, eclipses, and supernovae that were documented across various cultures during the supposedly non-existent period. Chinese astronomers, operating entirely independently from European calendrical systems, recorded solar eclipses and other astronomical phenomena during these centuries that perfectly aligned with modern astronomical calculations. Islamic scholars similarly documented celestial events that corroborate the standard chronology. These astronomical observations follow predictable patterns that can be calculated backward with extreme precision using modern physics and astronomy. The perfect alignment between historical records of these events and modern astronomical retro-calculations provides powerful evidence that the conventional timeline is correct. For Illig's theory to be valid, we would have to believe that fabricators of history somehow possessed advanced astronomical knowledge allowing them to fake records of celestial events that would align perfectly with calculations made centuries later, a virtually impossible feat. Beyond astronomy, multiple scientific disciplines provide overwhelming evidence against Illig's hypothesis. Dendrochronology, the science of dating events through analyzing tree ring growth patterns, offers particularly compelling refutation. Tree rings form distinctive patterns based on yearly climate conditions, creating a natural calendar that can be traced back thousands of years. This unbroken chronological record shows no gaps or inconsistencies that would suggest missing or fabricated centuries. Archaeological evidence further contradicts the hypothesis. Excavations throughout Europe have unearthed settlements, artifacts, and remains that form a continuous material record through the supposedly phantom period. Radiocarbon dating consistently confirms the conventional dating of these artifacts. Additionally, the evolution of languages, particularly the development of Romance languages from Latin, shows a gradual change that aligns perfectly with the accepted timeline and would be impossible to explain if 3 centuries were removed from history. These scientific methods provide independent verification of the conventional chronology from disciplines that would have been impossible for medieval conspirators to anticipate or falsify. Each scientific approach uses entirely different methodologies yet arrives at the same conclusion. The years 614 to 911 CE definitely occurred, leaving physical, linguistic, and biological evidence of their passage. Despite its comprehensive debunking by historians, archaeologists, linguists, and scientists, the phantom time hypothesis exerts a peculiar cultural influence. It has developed a cult following among alternative history enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists, inspiring novels, art projects, and even a German musical. The theory appears periodically in popular media, internet forums, and YouTube videos, attracting new audiences fascinated by its radical reimagining of history. The enduring appeal of Illig's hypothesis may lie in its combination of intellectual complexity and dramatic narrative. It offers a conspiracy theory that requires no supernatural elements yet promises to profoundly overturn our understanding of history. For some, it represents an intellectual puzzle or thought experiment highlighting how historical knowledge is constructed and authenticated. For others, it exemplifies how seemingly logical arguments can lead to wildly incorrect conclusions when they begin from flawed premises or selectively interpret evidence. The theory's persistence demonstrates the powerful allure of conspiracy thinking and the human tendency to find patterns and explanations that align with preconceived notions or desired outcomes, even when overwhelming evidence points in another direction. The phantom time hypothesis provides valuable insights into how conspiracy theories develop and persist despite contradictory evidence. Like many conspiracy theories, it begins with genuine historical questions, in this case, the relative documentary scarcity of the early Middle Ages, and proceeds to offer a dramatic, all-encompassing explanation rather than accepting more mundane answers. It selectively emphasizes evidence that appears to support the theory while dismissing or reinterpreting the overwhelming evidence against it. The theory also demonstrates how expertise in one area, Illig was trained as a historian, doesn't necessarily prevent fundamental errors when working outside established methodological frameworks or when beginning with a predetermined conclusion. For historians, the phantom time hypothesis serves as a case study in historical methodology, highlighting the importance of corroborating evidence across multiple independent sources and disciplines. The theory's ultimate failure to withstand scrutiny demonstrates the robustness of historical knowledge when properly constructed through critical analysis of diverse primary sources, archaeological evidence, linguistic development, and scientific dating methods. The persistence of the theory despite this overwhelming counter-evidence reveals the challenges historians face in communicating methodological rigor to public audiences sometimes more attracted to dramatic narratives than to carefully qualified historical conclusions. As we navigate an era of increasing information accessibility and sometimes decreasing trust in established expertise, the phantom time hypothesis serves as both a cautionary tale and an invitation to critical thinking. The theory's continued popularity in the Internet age demonstrates how alternative historical narratives can find audiences regardless of their scholarly merit. Digital platforms allow such theories to spread rapidly, finding communities of interest that might have remained isolated in previous eras. This phenomenon raises important questions about historical literacy and critical evaluation of sources in contemporary society. How do we distinguish between legitimate historical revision based on new evidence and unfounded speculation? What responsibility do platforms have in contextualizing historical claims? The phantom time hypothesis exemplifies both the democratization of historical discussion and the challenges this presents. It reminds us that historical knowledge, while subject to reinterpretation and refinement, is built upon converging lines of evidence from multiple disciplines. The digital age offers unprecedented access to historical information but also requires increasingly sophisticated skills to evaluate competing claims about the past. The theory's persistence despite definitive refutation highlights the gap between academic historical methodology and popular understanding of how historical knowledge is constructed and verified. The fact that Charlemagne and his contemporaries continue to be studied, debated, and reinterpreted by historians is not evidence of their fictional nature, but rather testament to their enduring historical significance and the complex legacy they left behind, a legacy that spans not phantom years, but very real centuries of human experience. The phantom time hypothesis, while ultimately unsupported, has inadvertently stimulated discussion about how we know what we know about the past. It has prompted historians to articulate more clearly the multiple, independent lines of evidence that support conventional chronology. In this sense, even thoroughly debunked theories can serve a productive role in refining historical communication and methodology. The theory stands as one of history's most creative, if ultimately unsupported, revisionist theories. Its study reveals the powerful allure of conspiracy thinking and the human tendency to find patterns and explanations that align with preconceived notions. While mainstream scholarship has thoroughly rejected Illig's hypothesis, its cultural persistence provides a valuable case study in how historical evidence is evaluated and how alternative narratives gain traction despite overwhelming contrary evidence. The theory reminds us that historical understanding requires both creative thinking and rigorous evaluation, qualities that, when properly balanced, advance rather than undermine our understanding of the human past. The phantom time hypothesis represents one of history's most fascinating intersections of academic speculation, conspiracy theory, and public imagination. While thoroughly refuted by multiple independent lines of evidence, astronomical records, dendrochronology, archaeological findings, linguistic evolution, and more, its persistence demonstrates our complex relationship with historical knowledge. Heribert Illig's theory challenges us to consider how we know what we know about the past, how historical evidence is evaluated, and why some alternative narratives maintain cultural traction despite overwhelming contrary evidence. As we continue to navigate an information landscape where established expertise competes with compelling alternative narratives, the phantom time hypothesis serves as both cautionary tale and intellectual exercise. It reminds us that historical knowledge, while always subject to revision based on new evidence, rests upon methodologically sound foundations that cannot be easily dismissed. The real Middle Ages, including Charlemagne and his contemporaries, have left an indelible mark on European and world history not because they were fabricated by medieval conspirators, but because they genuinely existed, shaped their world, and continue to influence ours nearly 12 centuries later. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for updates. Your feedback is appreciated. We hope to see you again.